To be a woman means that you will bleed. Bleeding doesn't always have to be so scary or gross or even dangerous. Bleeding is a normal, healthy part of a woman's life. It begins with menstruation, and then during childbirth and after childbirth, and then finally into your perimenopause and your menopausal years. And then what happens in this perimenopausal transition for some women is that they start to experience these erratic or unpatterned cycles, and it's called menstrual flooding. And so today on Apothecary Wisdom and in this live conversation, we're going to be talking more about menstrual flooding and dysfunctional uterine bleeding. And this is a live conversation. So what's happening is I'm in front of the camera and Heaven's behind the camera. And I'm not going to be able to see your comments, but I encourage you to leave comments and conversate and let us know what's going on with you so we can learn together and we can support each other and we can learn about plants together. We can learn about women's wisdom and women's empowerment together. If this is our first time meeting, my name is Maria Chaudhry, and I'm a licensed midwife and an herbalist and the creator of Birth Song Botanicals. And we make nourishing herbal remedies for menstrual health, for childbirth and lactation, and for children's wellness and children's immune health. And you can find out more about us and our products, and you can see more of our videos and our podcasts and our blogs. We have hundreds of blogs on birthsongbotanicals.com. And I also want to just remind you real quick, every week on Thursday at noon Central Time, we're going to be live on Facebook and on Instagram. Every week our topic changes a little bit, but it's always in the realm of women's health or children's health. Okay, so I'm just saying hi to all of you and encouraging you to say hi back and let us know where you're listening from. And let us know if any of you, how many of you are in your pregnancy phase? How many of you are in your postpartum phase? Or who's starting to notice that they're having regular, normal, healthy menstrual cycles and they're really into it? Or who's starting to notice that they're having challenging cycles? Or who's starting to notice that they're making the change and they're having signs of perimenopause? And then who's postmenopausal? If any of you are out there, just kind of let us know where you are in your cycle, and then we can start to make videos for you. Okay? So let's get started when we're talking about menstrual flooding and why this is such an important conversation. These conversations are so important for us women to be having with each other, because when we understand more about our bodies, then we understand what normal is and what safe is and what healthy is, and we have realistic expectations of our experiences, versus then we know what's abnormal and what's pathologic and what's a problem and what's urgent and what necessitates a higher level of care. Those are real empowering conversations, and they really help us be independent. And when I say independent, I want to right off the bat talk about not that you have to go through it alone, but that you are able to stand on your own 2 feet, find your voice, say yes to what you need to say yes to, know what you need to say no to, and you can feel supported in your authenticity and in your vulnerability. That to me is independence. It's not isolation and loneliness and separation. Okay, so let's get started on this whole topic, right, of menstrual flooding and this whole perimenopausal transition. I'm going to refer to my notes, okay, and I'm going to start with a sip real quick. Okay, so one of the big reasons why this conversation is so important is because of the huge astronomical number of hysterectomies that happen today in the United States. when I looked at this and prepared for this conversation, I was looking at my Herbal textbook that was written by Aviva Romm. And I've had that book now for, I don't know, 10 years. And the statistic I'm about to say came from that book. And at the time, 10 years ago in that textbook, it said that 650,000 hysterectomies happen every year. And they happen from or because of abnormal or dysfunctional uterine bleeding. But about half of those hysterectomies are from benign abnormal or uterine bleeding, from things like fibroids or just misunderstandings, right, of knowing what's normal. And of those 650,000 women each year that have hysterectomies, approximately 650 women die from complications of hysterectomies every year. That's huge. And another thing that's really staggering is by the age of 65, 37% of us women will have had a hysterectomy. That's almost half of the women, right? And so as a midwife, I tend to compare these menopausal conversations to birth and pregnancy conversations. So it's really similar, and just as how in the birth world, cesarean sections are life-saving. And at the same time, they're overused and they're over-medicalized and they're controlling women and they're disrupting their natural process and they're damaging to their psychology and to their emotions and to their feelings and to their body. And instead of being saving, they become traumatizing. That same thing happens with hysterectomies. They're the same. They can be life-saving. They can be totally appropriate. The exact thing that you need to have. And at the same time, they're an example of aggressive management, over-medicalization, of taking something away and becomes really traumatizing and displacing for women. And so hysterectomies are a huge conversation to have, and abnormal uterine bleeding is one of the primary reasons that women are having hysterectomies today. Okay? So here's just a general list of things that cause abnormal uterine bleeding, and I'm going to start to call it dysfunctional uterine bleeding. They're similar terms, but dysfunctional fits better for this conversation. And these are some general reasons. There's a whole long list, but these are some general reasons. So one of the primary one is anovulatory bleeding, and we'll talk more about what that means in this conversation. And then the number one primary one, which is related to anovulatory bleeding, is dysfunctional uterine bleeding, right? And then other things are endometriosis, uterine fibroids, menorrhagia or menstrual flooding, and that's the primary topic of this conversation. But then other things like polyps and skin tags, they can also lead to these abnormal uterine or dysfunctional uterine bleeding. And specifically for menopause in this conversation, we're going to talk about menorrhagia. We're going to talk about this menstrual flooding. And we're about to dive into definitions and some things. But the midwife in me wants to immediately address, like, boom, what are the parameters of normal bleeding and what's excessive bleeding and what is a hemorrhage? Okay. So this is really important to know. It doesn't matter if you're immediately postpartum, because these are the exact same parameters I gave to women that are postpartum, and these are the exact same parameters I'm giving to all of you if you're perimenopausal and you're experiencing heavy periods and menstrual flooding and you're wondering what's too much. So here's the clear parameter for you. If you fill 2 pads in a half an hour or less, the 2 pads are filled in a half an hour or less, or if you're having continuous vaginal bleeding, that is a classic hallmark definition of a hemorrhage. If you have excessive bleeding, these symptoms will probably start to show up too. And if you have these symptoms, you need to get urgent medical attention. You need to call your midwife or call your doctor or get to the doctor as quickly as possible. These are the signs of a hemorrhage. Okay, you will feel dizzy, faint, lightheaded, ringing in your ears, pale, your blood pressure drops, you feel weak, you feel fatigued, you feel confused. Women get really confused. A lot of times women are really smart and clear communicators. They know exactly what they need, but after they've had a hemorrhage, they're like confused, and you can't really listen to them or trust them because they don't have enough oxygen in their brain, and they're like thinking weird. So when you're taking care of someone and they're thinking weird, take them to the doctor. They've bled too much. So that's like the excessive quantity of blood. So then we're talking about this menstrual flooding, or this menorrhagia, which means, or dysfunctional uterine bleeding, which is defined as excessive bleeding or prolonged bleeding. And then the rest of the definition is without any pathology. So everything happening to their body is normal. It's a normal part of menopause and perimenopause, but it seems excessive, and it's lasting a long time. So when you're talking about duration of bleeding, then you'll think about, so when you think about a period lasting for 7 days, that's a long period. But to fit this category, if it's 10, 12, or 14 days, that is technically too long, and it warrants an evaluation, a conversation with a care provider to understand what's happening. Because women that are in this perimenopausal process that takes years to unfold, and last week I did a whole video about perimenopause and menopause, so I encourage you to go there and listen to that. It's called Herbs for Menopause and Hot Flashes. But I want to say that during this process of menopause, most of women will experience at least one episode of this menstrual flooding, and the vast majority of the time it's going to be completely normal. However, when you have periods that are lasting longer than 10, 12 days, you should get them evaluated, because there is a chance that it could be something more serious, and it could be a disease or a pathology, and it could be something that definitely needs medical attention. It could be something like cancer. So you want to check that out, okay? Let's have a deep breath, and let's talk. I want to restate the definition of menstrual flooding and have a little sip of my chlorophyll here. Okay, so menorrhagia is, like I said, it's a type of dysfunctional uterine bleeding, and it's defined as excessive or prolonged, unpatterned endometrial bleeding that is in an absence of disease. So it's in a normal part of your life. And this type of dysfunctional uterine bleeding can happen at essentially 2 times most predominantly in women's lives. It happens in early adolescence, when women, young adolescents, are starting their cycle, and their ovaries and their ovarian cycles are not totally developed yet, and so their hormone levels are not totally developed yet, and so then that leads to these erratic, unpatterned, heavy cycles. But then again, it happens again at the end of their fertility cycle, when they're going into the perimenopause and their menopausal cycles, when their estrogen levels are lower, and so their estrogen levels drop, and it makes it so that our ovaries are not as responsive or not as productive as they were, and so then it leads to this erratic, heavy menstrual cycle. So those are the 2 common times. And okay, so I want to just take one little step back. If when you're in an experience in your body that you have a really heavy cycle, that you're concerned about the duration or the quantity, you want to seek attention and get it ruled out to confirm that it's normal. I also want to say that the vast majority of the time it will be normal, but once you have that confidence of, okay, what's happening to me is normal biological transformation, okay, this is a healthy part of it, okay, this is what it is, Then you can look to botanicals, and botanicals can become a very healthy, reasonable, great starting point. So you want to work with botanicals, and you want to work with healthy, life-affirming practices like nutrition, diet, exercise, and maybe even weight management. All those things, once you can start to work with those things and get the results you want, then wonderful. Or if you start to work with those things and you're not getting the results you want, then you go into the more medicalized management. Okay, so once we have this all cleared up, that this is normal, biological, physiological, perimenopausal bleeding, then we work with herbs. I mean, herbs are women's best friend. They support us all throughout our menstruation, and they support us all throughout our pregnancy and lactation and our immune health and in every area of our life. So what are the goals of working with herbs? What are the classifications and categories of herbs, and what are they going to do for us, and how do we learn more about them and work effectively with them? So one of the first goals, if we're talking about women that had a normal cycle and now are like spontaneously bleeding way heavier than they thought, and they just had their period a week ago, and then 2 weeks later they're bleeding for 3 or 4 days, and then it's just kind of all over the place, and they're confused and they're taken aback by it, and it's becoming stressful, and it's becoming depleted, and it's becoming too much blood. And so how do we manage that? So the first thing we want to do is we want to manage the acute bleeding. We want to slow down the excessive bleeding. So we want to normalize the bleeding. The next thing we want to do is we want to address any nutritional deficiencies, such as anemia or any other nutritional deficiencies. The next thing we want to do is support the central nervous system by helping manage and deal with stress. And then the last thing we want to work with herbs for is to help balance and harmonize our hormones. Okay, so let's break this down just a little bit. Let's talk about the first category of herbs that are going to help manage the excessive bleeding so that you don't bleed too much. These herbs are called styptic herbs, or they have a lot of names: styptic, astringent, antihemorrhagic, hemostatic. They're all slightly different, but essentially when you boil it down, what they're doing is they're taking wet tissue and they're drying it up. Or even more simple terms, they just help stop bleeding, right? They help tighten and tonify the tissue so it's not flaccid and loose and just bleeding all over the place. One of the primary herbs in this category that you've heard me talk about, and you'll hear me talk about again and again, it is one of my primary teaching herbs and favorite herbs to learn more about and share with you about, is yarrow. Yarrow is going to be a wonderful astringent herb to help dry up the blood, and it has another benefit in this conversation, is that it creates uterine tone, a uterine contraction, and keep the uterus nice and tight. And it also, not totally related to this conversation, but kind of, is that it helps prevent infection. So another reason that menopausal women specifically have dysfunctional uterine bleeding is because that they have vaginal atrophy. And because of that vaginal atrophy and that vaginal dryness, they get infections, and those infections cause bleeding. And so yarrow is appropriate for that type of abnormal bleeding also, and for abnormal uterine bleeding. So it's menopausal women should be friends with yarrow. The other herb you've heard me talk about that's in a lot of our products, particularly the postpartum herb bath, is going to be shepherd's purse. Shepherd's purse is a really special, near and dear herb to my heart too. It's actually a carnivorous plant. Little insects get onto they're called purses, the part of the plant, and the plant will absorb them and eat them, right? And so the saying is that shepherd's purse will take a life. It'll take the life of those insects to save your life, right? And so that's really powerful. Shepherd's purse helps coagulate blood. So instead of this free bleeding, it helps create blood clots so you're not just free bleeding, right? And then another really powerful astringent herb is one that you know, but you might have worked with in a different way, is called witch hazel. So if you've ever had a hemorrhoid, you've had a swollen, puffy vessel, and you wanted to stop the bleeding, you put witch hazel on it, and it tightens up that vessel and it stops the bleeding. That does the same thing for your uterus, right? It tightens it up and stops the bleeding. And then another one that's a little less known is called bayberry. And bayberry is incredibly astringent. Like you put it in your mouth and it's like cotton, like immediate, like really kind of intense, but that shows its power. As soon as it touches the surface and it enters your system, it dries things up. So, and another one is red raspberry leaf. Red raspberry leaf is an astringent herb. It creates uterine tone and it's nourishing. And so I'm going to reference red raspberry leaf again in this conversation because it is so helpful. It is once again one of those primary women's herbs that we should all love and drink our whole lives. I wanted to say something about these herbs. In my midwifery practice, I would always have in my bag and set up everything ready for the birth, and I would have this thing. I called it womb stringe, like womb, uterus, astringent, tighten, and in case of a hemorrhage. And I would use these herbs, and I relied on them, and they work really well. I see it in my own life and in my own practice, and women that are postpartum bleeding are bleeding far more than anybody else, right? And you can see it work really quickly. You can blend these herbs up yourself and into a tea or into a tincture, or you can have an herbalist make them for you. Yes, you can put them into a tea if that's what you have, and you're there in your kitchen cupboard and your home medicine herbal cabinet, and you're starting to bleed heavy, and that's what you have, and you have yarrow tea and red raspberry leaf tea. Drink that. However, if you blended all these together, yarrow, shepherd's purse, witch hazel, bayberry, and red raspberry leaf, it would be an incredibly effective remedy, but it would be hard to drink. Even the thought of it, I see my mouth like puckering up. So I would really actually recommend a tincture for a couple of reasons. Once you have a little water under your tongue and you put the tincture under your tongue, it's going to absorb really quickly. And so it's going to work really effectively and really fast. And you don't have to do too many things to prepare for it. You can just take it. There is something else I should probably share with you. I wrote a blog about this, but I didn't add this to the blog, but I'm going to share it with you because you're live on this video. If somebody is bleeding, if you're bleeding, or you're with somebody that's bleeding and you need to help them or you need to help yourself, these herbs are really safe. There's not a lot of contraindications. So it's okay to take a lot of it. So what I'm trying to say is don't take it all at once. You take a dropper under your tongue and then you wait about 15 minutes and see what your bleeding's doing. If you're still bleeding, then take another dropper and then wait about 15 minutes and then take another dropper. Instead of waiting hours between your dosage, because you're in an acute situation and you need to manage it right now, and so you can take it minutes apart instead of hours apart. Okay? So that's really important. And that's, again, the reason why a tincture will be more effective. Right. Let's move on. Questions, thoughts? Not seeing much activity over here, y'all. Welcome. Okay, here we go. The next thing we want to do is we want to address all these deficiencies, because a woman that's bleeding for more than 10 days or a woman that's bleeding heavier than normal, she's going to feel depleted, fatigued. She's going to lead to anemia. And then all this is going to perpetuate and snowball and amplify all the other symptoms of perimenopause and menopause that are bothering her. Symptoms like insomnia, muscle pain, fear, anxiety, depression, hot flashes. It just gets worse when you're fatigued and depleted. So if you've heard me talk before, you know I'm going to talk about nourishing herbs. And The primary nourishing herb was one I already mentioned in this conversation, is red raspberry leaf, because it's going to be high in all your vitamins and minerals, and it's going to create uterine tone, and it's going to help with the bleeding, and it's going to help nourish your blood, so it's going to help with the depletion. The other herb is nettles. Nettles is really high in iron. It's considered a food, and this food is a very blood building, oxygenating, enhancing, and fortifying herb. And I have both of those herbs in Women's Balance tea for you, so that you can get what you need as you gracefully navigate through your transition, right? And so another really important herb, it's really an herbal remedy, can be made from a lot of different herbs. I've seen chlorophyll made from alfalfa, I've seen it made from nettle, I've seen it made, we make ours from mulberry. And chlorophyll, I'm drinking some right now. I've actually diluted it a couple times, but so it can be a lot darker than this. But chlorophyll is a wonderful way to oxygenate your blood, give yourself your vitamins and minerals. It's simple. It's just put a couple drops in your water, drink it multiple times. You don't have to prepare something. It's shelf stable. It can be in your purse. It can be, you can have one at your office and one at home. Once again, from my real life experience, I believe so firmly and so rootedly in the benefits of chlorophyll that when I would attend births, we know that she's going to bleed heavy, right? Like, that's the part of it. So we're prepared for that. And I would do all these home visits, and I would say, where's your chlorophyll? And like, legit, if you don't have chlorophyll, you can't have a home birth. If you don't have a high iron level, you're not going to have a home birth, because you're going to bleed too much. And so the same really goes for true for you. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that I see it help people recover exponentially faster. And once again, anytime that you're depleted, it makes everything worse. Chlorophyll helps you not be depleted. All right, and so what is the next one? The next one is going to be stress. And so not all menstrual flooding comes from stress. A lot of it comes from this anovulatory cycle that we just talked about. It's about your hormones not having the sufficient level of estrogen and progesterone, and so that's why you're having this breakthrough bleeding. However, a vast majority of the time, if it's caused by stress, or what's happening is causing you stress and stressing you out and making you concerned and confused and overwhelmed. So, nervine herbs, these are relaxing nervine herbs. They are chamomile and passion flower and valerian root. Those herbs will really help calm and soothe and comfort your central nervous system. They help relieve pain. They help soothe anxiety and fear and grief. They help you sleep better. They improve your digestion. They help you cope with life in a way that feels more centered and more grounded, so you're not constantly reacting to things. And so Solid and Serene is a remedy that is blended with these nervines. I've made a whole bunch of videos on our YouTube channel. You'll see in the playlist nervines, and I talk explicitly and give a lot of detail about each one of those herbs and all the ways that they can help. And then I also did a whole video about insomnia and ways that it can help. And I've also done a whole bunch of videos about stress relief and anxiety with videos and relaxations and guided visualizations. And so there's a whole playlist and series there for you if you're experiencing a lot of stress. So I encourage you to look at that and go there. And then another herb that goes in this category for stress relief is going to be an adaptogen called ashwagandha. And ashwagandha is an adaptogen. Not all adaptogens are the same. Some adaptogens give you a lot of energy, and some adaptogens help you calm down and help you feel centered, but they do tend to go into your body and help you in ways that your body needs. Ashwagandha specifically in the conversation of stress relief is the one I would look to because it's not so stimulating, and what it does is a lot of similar things to those nervines. It helps you sleep, it helps you calm down, but it also helps you harmonize and balance your hormones. So not only is it great for stress relief, but it's also great for hormones. You'll start to see that a lot of these herbs touch more than one category, and that's why they're so helpful to us. Ashwagandha is also in women's balance, and ashwagandha is in menstrual harmony. And then the last goal is to harmonize or balance our hormones, right? So we as herbalists, we love words like that, harmonize and balance. Really, these herbs are called hormonal regulators or modulators, right? And there's a whole long list of them. I'm just going to talk about 4 because they're appropriate to this conversation. And the one I want to start with is chasteberry or vitex. And chasteberry, I want to start with it is because it's the most broad-reaching, far-reaching for uterine irregularities or uterine dysfunction or even uterine dysfunctional bleeding. So things like endometriosis, infertility, irregular cycles, PCOS, hormonal shifts, mood changes, all those things, heavy bleeding, all those things Vitex is really helpful for. There is one thing, Vitex and chasteberry are the same thing, I just want to make sure I said that. And one thing to note about this herb is if you're a person that's really depressed, not like gets a little depressed, but like you're really managing and living with depression, Vitex might actually promote more depression, so it might not be the right herb for you. So I want to share that with you, and that's why it's important to understand why an herb might be good for one thing but not good for another thing, and so we need to have a complex, multidimensional view of things. And then in that same vein, the next one is Dong Quai. Dong Quai is an herb that I've worked with extensively in postpartum women, and it is great for menstrual irregularities. It is great for helping a person that has an irregular cycle that's all over the place and it needs to just get synchronized and harmonized. That's why it's in menstrual harmony, to help regulate the cycle. However, why I would work with it postpartum is because immediately after birth, when this woman is bleeding, the vast majority of the time it's because the placenta is still inside and the uterus can't clamp down, and so she's still bleeding. So in a postpartum hemorrhage, you manage it by getting the placenta out, and then the uterus can clamp down, and then she'll stop bleeding. Dong Quai helps get the placenta out. However, in perimenopausal women, they don't have a placenta inside them. So what's inside their uterus is blood. And so it's just going to help get the blood out so it can perpetuate and enhance and promote and make worse the bleeding. So Dong Quai is not the best herb if you're feeling like you're hemorrhaging, right? In this perimenopausal state right here. So I wanted you to know that. And then motherwort. Motherwort is an herb you've heard me talk about. That's probably in the playlist on the side somewhere. Motherwort is an herb that helps you feel really good. Helps you cope with your moods and your depression and your anxiety. And it helps with uterine tone. And it's a hormonal modulator and regulator. And motherwort is also in menstrual harmony. So there's that. And then also motherwort is also in cycle relief because motherwort is an appropriate herb for bleeding and uterine tone. And so motherwort should be part of your conversation. And then the last herb that's a hormonal regulator will be wild yam. Now wild yam is a beautiful herb because it's very soft. It's very relaxing. It's very comforting. It's sometimes I see it in these categories. It's not a relaxing nervine, but it is very softening and relaxing. And it's a hormonal modulator and regulator. And it's in menstrual harmony. And so if you're dealing with pain or stress, wild yam is really helpful for that. And it's also really helpful, wild yam, kind of off topic, is that it's good for if you have upset, like nausea and vomiting, and you have a lot of muscle cramps and indigestion. Wild yam is really helpful for that. And if you're having a lot of cramps, essentially wild yam is helpful for that. So I wanted to share those hormonal modulators with you. And I wanted to share some things like herbs that manage acute bleeding, and then long-term chronic things like depletion, and then long-term chronic things and acute things like anxiety and stress. That's both acute and long-term. And then hormonal regulation, those are long-term. And so I wanted to give you a couple tools to work with. And I really hope that we continue learning together and working together, learning about herbs, learning about women's health and menstruation. We've talked about a couple of videos about menopause, and next week we're going to keep in the same sort of conversation, but we're going to shift it a little bit, and we're going to start talking more about menstruation, and dare I say, how to enjoy your menstruation and how to synchronize it and regulate it, and some herbs to help you with that. And I also want to, a couple of announcements because you're live and you're local. For those of you that are local, I have a couple of events that are coming up. They're not immediate, but they're coming up, so I'm putting them on your radar. On February 9th, like a few days before Valentine's Day, I'm going to do a workshop at the Four of Wands here in Fayetteville. It's going to be called Botanica Erotica, and we'll learn a lot about aphrodisiac herbs, and we'll go through guided meditations, and we'll explore our sensuality and our femininity and pleasure. So that'll be pretty cool. And we just posted the tickets to that, and there's really limited space. There's only 14 people total can be in the room, and I'm one of those people. So there you go. I'm excited about that. There'll be a link to that in the description below. And then another thing I'm really excited about is doing a combined Qigong workshop with a beautiful woman in town. Her name is Joy Caffrey, and she's an energy healer and mentor and inspirational, powerful woman. And we'll be doing that on March 7th, and that'll be on Mount Sequoia in a beautiful room on Mount Sequoia in springtime, and I'm super excited about that. So I want to invite you to that, and we'll be getting tickets and everything ready, so be on the lookout for those things. And I want to just remind you that when you like and subscribe and share these videos, it just helps spread the good news out into the world. And I want to remind you that we have videos on YouTube and podcasts on SoundCloud, and we have blogs and products and everything on birthsongbotanicals.com. And until next time, my friends, drink deep and always walk in beauty.